Hey, do you suffer from bloating, gas, or upset stomach? It could be food intolerance. Stay tuned to learn more.
You're listening to Live Foreverish, a show dedicated to helping you live just a little longer. Here's your hosts, Dr. Mike and Dr. Crystal Gossard.
All right, welcome to Live Foreverish. So, Dr. Crystal, we're talking about food intolerances today. Basically, tell me if I'm right. Food intolerance is just some type of adverse reaction, food reaction that creates a symptom from certain foods that you eat at the end of the day. Sound
Yes,
good?
and yes, that's right. It's a type of food reaction. And so you can react to food in different ways. And it may be food or a component found in food.
Yeah. And what makes this hard though to really drill down for people is the symptoms that a certain food reaction can cause are kind of all over the place, Dr.
Yes.
Crystal. And even the severity is kind of all over the place.
And the point at which the symptom manifests is all over the
All over
place.
the place, yeah. And so it's hard to pinpoint food down. This reminds me, I know we've talked about the mystery symptoms before and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think to paint maybe a picture of the person we're talking to today, you have some symptoms, headaches, fatigue. I'm just going through this list right here: joint pain, maybe some brain fog, mood issues, muscle pain, insomnia. I mean, this is just all over the place. But maybe you have a couple of those. You've been worked up by your doctor, can't find anything. At some point, maybe we should just think about, could this be my diet? Could this be what I'm eating?
Absolutely. I think that's always, for me, the first place to start with many of these things
Yeah.
is just figuring out what you're eating, how that is impacting your energy levels, and how that impacts your overall health.
Yeah. The only food reaction that we know and that's easy to diagnose is the true anaphylactic ones. Like that one, those ones we know.
Like
And you
you and your
probably already know
banana.
yourself. You have an EpiPen. I did, it happened to me with a banana years ago. There's no guesswork there. I mean, that's easy. But beyond that, all those other symptoms from joint problems, muscle problems, insomnia, brain, whatever. I mean, it could be anything.
It
Right.
could
So
be, yes.
yeah. And so you want to think about food. So let's run through. There are three main types of reactions to food, right? Let's run through those for the audience. What's the first one?
So, as you mentioned, true allergies it's kind of your first one. Food allergies is the first type of reaction. These are mediated by the immune system. We typically think IgE, that fast acting antibody. These are life threatening. Life threatening. You need an EpiPen. If they are really, really bad allergies, some people, they can quickly kind of get to an antihistamine. It's happened to me once.
Yeah, it could be.
20 years ago,
Yeah.
and I don't have allergies, but I had sushi and got home and my throat started closing up. And I was able to take an antihistamine. It wasn't life threatening, but they can be. So that's your true allergy.
I ate a banana once. My throat closed up, and I woke up in the emergency room.
Whoa!
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
that was 20 some odd years or 30 years. I don't remember how old I was. Yeah, crazy, right? And so yeah, so that type 1, most people already know. I think, right? Peanuts, whatever that may be. Most people know they have that. It's immune regulated, and it's a massive reaction, right? Number 2, we are calling food sensitivities. What's the difference there?
Yeah, so these are where you may have some delayed reactions, and this is very controversial, so I'm just going to put that out there. We still need a little, I would like to have more research on this, but mediated by what more alternative practitioners are identifying as IgG reactions, slow
Yeah.
reacting, or delayed antibody reactions. Those are related more to those mystery symptoms,
Right. Right.
the eczema, the brain fog, and just feeling tired all the time and the joint pain. Those are considered food sensitivities. They're not in a category of a true allergy. They're not in the third category that we will talk about, which are the intolerances.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really a popular theory a few years ago that IgG, this antibody, was mediating this type of more delayed sensitivity. But I guess some new research has come out, and there's not that the research was wrong. Maybe we're just kind of questioning it a little bit. And I think that's where it's still kind of a question mark about what truly is a food sensitivity. But then you just mentioned the third category is the food intolerances. These are definitely different because they're not involving the immune system, right?
Correct. And this is, our focus for our podcast today. This is more of a difficulty breaking down food or food components.
Right.
And this is associated with what you mentioned earlier, the gas and the bloating and potentially abdominal
Yeah.
pain, maybe even some diarrhea. So those classic digestive symptoms are more likely to be an intolerance.
Yeah, well, I bet you people listening right now are dealing with this because it's estimated that up to 20% of the population deal with food intolerances. So if the food intolerance is more to me not able to handle the food itself, I can't break it down for some reason, whatever. What are the most common food sources that cause that then?
Well, most people are familiar with lactose intolerance. You see this in the grocery store when you're shopping and you're trying to find a milk. We have the Lactaid, which is a brand
Yeah,
specifically designed to help you to break down that sugar, the lactose, which is a carbohydrate or a sugar found in milk. So you do find that, or just carbohydrate intolerance, being the most common type of intolerance.
right. And as a matter of fact, the 20% of the people of the population have intolerances. Probably a vast majority of those fall under the carbohydrate category, I would assume. The second category, though, the second most common one, we may have to explain this a little bit, right? It's histamine. So see, I think most people already kind of know histamine reactions, take antihistamine, they see that. But what are we really talking about? Is this histamine within the food? Like, what is this?
Well, it's histamine that's produced in the body, histamine in the food, yes, and the general inability to properly break down histamine in the digestive tract. And I do want to be very clear, when we're talking about these intolerances, we're talking about the body's, the enzyme. Uh, Histamase is what it's called, or also known as diamine oxidase. You see it written in both ways, but this is the enzyme that breaks down histamine that is found in many of the foods that we eat. We eat those foods, and then we have symptoms.
Yeah. So basically, the histamine builds up, and histamine we know can cause reactions in the body. In
They
this case, it's the
can.
gut. In this case, it's the gut specifically.
Yeah, so it's the gut related reactions, but it couples with some of the classic histamine reactions, as well as the itching. You see migraines being associated with histamine, and general fatigue as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So this is at the very get-go, we talked about that there's just a myriad of symptoms. The severity of them are all over the place. Whether they develop or not are all over the place. And I'm starting to think like the bowel ones I can see are more probably towards that carbohydrate intolerance. With histamine, I wonder if that's where some of those other symptoms on that list came from. The mood, the brain fog, the itchiness, that kind of stuff. Makes me wonder if that's where a lot of those extra symptoms are coming from. That's really interesting. Did you cover it? So histamine in foods as well? Like if you're eating if you already have a problem breaking down histamine and then you start eating some foods that are high in histamine, that's not a good combination. Like, what are some of those foods?
Yeah, so preserved meats or your cured meats, oily fish, canned fish, fermented foods. And that
All
makes me
good stuff.
sad because
All good stuff.
when you put the umbrella of fermented foods, then you start getting really sad because that's your sauerkraut and your pickles and your
all
kimchi
of
and all
that.
these foods that we say are great for gut health.
I
But
don't like, for me, the oily fish, that makes me sad too. I like my sardines and I like my anchovies
yeah, your
but I don't
cancer.
I guess I'm okay because I eat that stuff a lot and I don't have symptoms. So I guess I'm able to break down the histamine okay.
Maybe so. Maybe that's not histamine's not your deal, your issue.
Trust
Lucky
me, I have
guy.
many others, but this one's not it. And then next on the list, again, we're covering the most common sources of the food intolerance: carbohydrate, lactose intolerance, histamine. Really good there. Caffeine is the next on the list.
Yeah, and that is one that people will know pretty quickly if they have an intolerance to caffeine, because your body is just not metabolizing it as efficiently or quickly
Yeah,
as
yeah. I,
it,
I think
others.
it's been long known that there are high metabolizers of caffeine. There's low metabolite, right? Those high metabolizers are the people that can drink a espresso shot an hour before going to bed and it doesn't even affect them. My Greek grandpa was like that. He would drink, Dr. Crystal, he would end his dinner with the most black, almost viscous coffee you would ever see someone drink. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was some Greek thing or whatever it was. And he would drink that down, and 30 minutes later, he's on the couch, like out. So he was
Not me.
probably a high metabolizer.
Yes.
Right. But if you're on the low side, you can have some of those symptoms.
Yes, and so what that means when we say intolerance, then that means that you have caffeine, you're very sensitive to it, and you may have some other symptoms like the rapid heartbeats and kind of feeling anxious. And that can be a sign that maybe you're having intolerance to caffeine.
Other types of causes of intolerance, obviously gluten is there. One called lectin is there as well. Salicylates. These are all mostly plant derived stuff. The salicylates are. So there could be other ones out there, but I guess the top would be the carbohydrates, the histamine, the caffeine.
Yes.
That's probably where a vast majority of those intolerances fall. So what is really going on here then? If I know we said at the get-go, it's not immune regulated. This is not an immune thing. It has to do with breaking down. I'm not able to break down stuff. I get, but what else might be playing a role here? Is how the health of the gut important for this? What else is going on?
Yes, the health of the gut, the impairment of digestive enzymes, as well as potentially leaky gut is also involved, more so with those sensitivities. But just in general, you want to start here, and try to heal the gut and see if that can help.
So it's like the chicken and the egg. Is it the intolerance to a certain food source leading to the dysbiosis, leading to a breakdown of some of my digestive enzymes, or is it the gut problem happening first? And then you build up intolerance, or we just don't know, and it's probably way more complex. I don't know.
Maybe the latter.
Yeah, I think so. Right. So, what are you going to do about all this? How do people know if again, if you're listening to this and this sounds like we're talking to you, you have some of those symptoms we mentioned. You never really thought about the food. But you definitely want to start thinking about that now because maybe your doctor has worked this up, can't find anything wrong. We don't know what's going on. So, Dr. Crystal, what can we suggest for them?
Well, you have to do the process of elimination. And we call it an elimination diet. And there are a couple of ways to do that. You can eliminate all suspected foods from your diet and then add them in one by one, or you can eliminate things one by one. What's vital for this process is keeping a diary, and a diary of what you're eating and a diary of your symptoms,
Right.
so that you can start kind of making those connections and saying, you know what, I'm really gassy tonight. What did I eat? And then you look back and then you track it, and then you can have a better idea of what you may want to take out and see how you feel.
Right.
And then add it back in and see if that symptom comes back.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
And then
pretty
you'll
simple.
know.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple idea, right? Take the food out, wait a couple of weeks, add it back in. Just make sure you only do one food at a time because you don't want to get confused,
Well,
right?
yeah, you can do that, but some people do they take it all out and then they
Oh,
add the food back in one at a time.
oh, I see. Yeah, yeah. But when you're adding back in, you can't add in everything because then you don't know again, right? So when you're adding it back in one at a time, that's what's key. Have you ever done this before?
No, I have not. I know I have lactose intolerance. So
So you don't need to test
uh
that.
so and I know certain things, certain carbohydrates. I do have some uh mild fructose intolerance, and so those are just things that I've never had to do a formal elimination diet. I For the most part, when it happens, I can think back and say, you know what? I had this particular food. I ate, if I ate something that's just
Yeah.
different than what I would typically eat, then I've kind of pinpointed it that way.
So if again, if we're talking about the main ones, lactose is a big one, histamine is a big category, even gluten's a pretty big category. What are some of the substitutions? And obviously, and we kind of already hit on this with the lactose, right? There's dairy products that have the lactose removed, right? Lactate, you mentioned one of those. So there's even ice cream and stuff now that doesn't
Yes,
have
and what most of those, they just add lactase enzyme into
it
the
just breaks it down.
product
Yeah,
to
yeah.
give the body the enzyme that it's not producing enough of. But yogurt, hard cheeses are usually fine. So some people are concerned that they're not getting their calcium or their vitamin D, and they have to avoid all dairy products, and that's not the case, because you can consume those foods or
Yeah,
find something that has the added lactase.
I think I had read that your best bet for hard cheeses is to go with Parmesan. Like real Parmesan apparently
Wow.
is going to affect you the least. So there is some hope, especially if you're a cheese lover like I am. God, thank God I'm not lactose intolerant. Woo! So going on to histamine, I guess get rid of those high histamine foods we talked about, right? I guess that's how you start.
I know, but it's everywhere. And it's foods that, like strawberries. You think, what is happening here? I mean, some foods it just makes sense. But yes, you should limit those high histamine foods. Avoid, I know some people who avoid leftovers, so they cook their food fresh. They can't meal prep, which also makes me sad because it's the longer the food sits that histamine is
Builds
produced
up. Yeah, builds up.
in the food. So, but often with histamine, you can sometimes just not have. It's more of the amount. So you may have some of that histamase, or that enzyme that breaks down histamine, and so it's a threshold. So sometimes you just have to find your threshold.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't go above the threshold. So you can say, you know what, I can have one turkey sandwich and maybe not have a turkey sandwich every day for lunch.
Gotcha. Yeah. Just see, it's kind of a trial and error type thing, a little bit, right? You
Yeah.
got to test out a little bit and remove this one. Can you eat a little bit of it? If you like to eat fish, I know you wanted to talk about a food hack here, but if you like to eat fish, especially if you're the whole fish type person, right? You like to grill that whole fish. Just make sure wherever you're getting it from that fish was gutted right away, right? That they didn't keep it whole, even though it was dead for a while, and then they gutted it. Too much histamine builds up.
That isn't that wild, Dr.
Yeah.
Mike? I think about my family of fishermen, and I'm just gonna let them know, hey guys, you as soon as that fish dies, you need to gut it because the gut bacteria start breaking down those tissue proteins into histamine. Because remember, histamine is made from histidine, which is just it's an amino acid that you find in your protein or in
Yeah.
your in food. So yes, gut that fish
That is
right
right. Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Do your fishing, and then there's usually spots that they have for you where you can gut fish. Just go right there and gut them. Be
Yeah.
done with it, right? Clean them all out, and that'll lower the histamine there. Gluten. What are we going to do about gluten? Gluten
Gluten-free
intolerance.
grains, rice, quinoa, buckwheat, oat. Make sure the oats are
Yeah.
certified gluten-free because they're often contaminated. And just see how you feel. Maybe limit the amount of gluten again. Find your threshold.
I like that. That's a good point. That this is not. We're not talking again celiac disease, which is totally different, right? We're talking about an intolerance, and I like the way you're saying find that threshold for you, right?
Hmm.
Maybe your experience with some of the symptoms because it was just too much gluten at that one point. Does that mean you can't have a little gluten here and there? I don't know. You got to find out for yourself. That's that threshold. I like that.
Yes.
I think that's a good way to educate people on that. So
Hmm.
and it gives you hope. If you like a little gluten, you might be able to do it.
I know. And then if not, there you're finding, of course, you can have the add-ins. You
Right.
can, as I mentioned, they add lactase enzyme to the lactose-free milk. You can take the enzyme directly in pill form. You can take enzymes for to help to break down gluten.
Right.
You can take enzymes to help to break down histamine.
The histamine, yeah, yeah. And that's actually really, I think, growing in popularity. I think there's a larger recognition beyond the lactose. The histamine that's building up in our gut is a big issue here, right? And so I think there's a lot of good research focused on how to help people break down that histamine. And you have that enzyme. You can go ahead and take it, and that's going to help break it down and minimize those symptoms.
Yes, and we do have research where it is minimizing the symptoms, specifically the histamine enzyme minimizing migraines. So it's something to just give it a try, especially if you're having some of those mystery symptoms.
I mean, to me, yeah, if I have to eliminate or eat way less certain foods, for me, like cheese, oily fish, you better believe I'm taking enzymes because I'm not. I love that stuff. Life's too short, so I look at it from the food standpoint. Yes, I'll take that pill if I can eat this. That's how I see it. Great information. By the way, if you want even more information, you can look at a new protocol that Life Extension has out. It's at lifeextension.com/food reactions. That's lifeextension.com/food reactions. When you're there at Life Extension, lifeextension.com, they're our sponsor and they would like to say thank you. So when you're there shopping around, when you go to checkout, use the discount code podcast and you will get 10% off $50 or more plus free shipping and handling. That's the discount code, Dr. Crystal.
Podcast.
Podcast. And then don't forget at liveforeverish.com, tons more episodes for you to download, like, and share. Please subscribe so you never miss a show. That's at liveforeverish.com. I'm Dr. Mike. That's
Dr. Crystal.
Thanks for listening.